value from success, growth in discovery. Golden Arrow Resources is a well-funded gold-copper exploration company with proven management and prospective properties in Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay. Golden Arrow trades on the Toronto Venture Exchange, symbol GRG, on Frankfurt, symbol G6A, and the OTCQB, symbol GARWF. For more information, visit us at goldenarrowresources.com or call Sean at 778-686-0135.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Peter Downing, the CEO of the Alberta USA Foundation, online at ab51pac.com. Peter, welcome back to the Goddard Report.
Hey, thanks, Jim. It's great to be back.
And Peter's speaking to us from Edmonton. Now, first, tell us about the Alberta USA Foundation.
Okay, so Wexit, the Wexit movement, which I co-founded last year, is basically phase one of the separation steps. So what we built was the infrastructure at the federal level and in 3 provinces to basically collapse the Conservative Party's infrastructure in Western Canada. And we did a good job, and we're successful at doing that. And if you read everything that's come out of Andrew Scheer or any of the Conservative Party in general, their big issue is maintaining national unity because their base is out here. And it's very important for us to actually remove the false hope of the Conservative Party so that Albertans will vote for their independence. Phase 2 is the Alberta USA movement. And simply put, whereas Wexit affects the Conservatives, the option of joining the United States, or even the possibility of joining the United States, it's a sum of the worst fears of all of the Canadian political establishment, including the Liberals. This is simply something they cannot ignore. 22% of Albertans support joining the U.S. outright as their first option anyways. And that's almost as much support as the NDP has in this province. So it's only going to grow if Trudeau gets reelected to a third term. In Alberta, we've crossed the threshold from paying $6,000 in taxes that we never see back, moving to $20,000 a year in taxes we don't see back, simply put, because the mass retirements in Ontario and Quebec. They will have to tax us more to maintain their quality of life. We will have to leave if we want to maintain our quality of life.
Is Jay Hill part of the Alberta USA Foundation?
No, he isn't. I reached out to him 4, maybe 5 months ago now to take over the Wexit Canada spot, and that's obviously moved things to the next steps there. And we're just waiting to see right now the result of the Conservative leadership race, and hopefully it's favorable to us that about half the support of that party comes to Wexit Canada. So I'd be very pleased with that, and he's doing a fine job of leading that in the direction it needs to go.
What would the 51st state of Alberta look like?
It would look exactly like it is right now. People can keep their Canadian passports if they want. Simply put, we would have, instead of having crippling taxes, crippling regulation, and the inability to move our products to market, we'd have access to be part of the number one economy in the world. We would have a conservative estimate, $100 to $200 billion in investment overnight. We'd have a diversified economy. We'd be protected by the number one military in the world. And, we're entering right now the age of America right now as America is moving to an isolated position because they are in energy independent. And, you're going to see a lot of things that we thought were big concerns or will not just simply go away. And the reality is we would rather be a part of that. And we bring much needed stability and increased oil reserves. The USA would go from number 10 in the world to number 3 overnight in the world, right behind Saudi Arabia. So it's a good thing for everybody.
What about BC, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba?
Well, funny enough, when we're looking at it from the Wexit perspective, it was all focused on Alberta and Saskatchewan. Historically, the U.S. has always wanted a liberal and a conservative state at the same time. It's a perfect opportunity for British Columbia. A lot of the same economic issues being faced in Alberta are faced in northern BC. You've got a lot of people in the BC interior who identify with Albertans. A lot of them are retired Albertans. And a lot of people in the lower mainland and on the left coast identify more with Portland and Oregon and Washington State, with Seattle and Portland, more than they do with Toronto and Montreal. So from an American perspective, having full access to the coastline, connecting Alaska with the lower 48, it makes much more sense. And simply put, if and when Alberta joins the United States, the economic situation of BC being cut off from the rest of Canada just make it a no-brainer that they'd be forced in time to join the United States too, on their own terms and in accordance with their own identity. But it's going to be a good thing for everybody. And then Saskatchewan and Manitoba would naturally follow.
How much resistance do you think Ottawa would put up to it?
Well, as much as they can. The problem for Ottawa is, with the Clarity Act that was designed to really make it home team advantage for secession negotiations. The reality is that Canada supported Kosovo's unilateral declaration of independence. They didn't even have a referendum. So Canada set a precedence on the world stage for unilateral declaration of independence and for the international community to accept it. So a lot of those institutions, the world courts, happen to be American institutions that America founded after World War II. So Canada sort of shot themselves in the foot. Ottawa shot themselves in the foot with the Kosovo decision. And the reality is they just can't hold a candle in negotiations when it comes to the United States. So we've taken all of the liabilities and turned into an asset when it comes to our own secession.
Would Canadians that would rather be part of the U.S. instead of Trudeau's Canada be welcome to move to Alberta prior to Alberta joining the U.S.?
I think as this becomes, we're taking this very soon. We're launching our first round of billboards on August 31st, publicly, very publicly. The more that this gets closer to becoming a reality and that we get closer to a referendum on this topic, I think that the more entrepreneurial and productive-minded folks across the country, whether it be in British Columbia or in Eastern Canada, will start to see Alberta as a very, very naturally attractive place, as any kind of political instability drives investment capital away from places like Toronto and Montreal, right into the capital markets of the USA and within the investment opportunities in Alberta. So I think you're going to see, with opportunities increase, you're going to see people take advantage of that.
Are you looking to join a Trump U.S. or a Biden United States?
I am an open Trump supporter. If I was an American, I would be, it's funny because Alberta is the most conservative province in Canada, but would be very middle of the road in the United States. And I would be that type of Republican. But the point is, it doesn't matter. It's a nonpartisan issue. The Democrats have just as much of reason to want to see Alberta as part of the Union, whether it be, again, the geopolitical situation, being able to take strong stances against China. You've got the automotive sector in the northeast of the U.S., and you've got Democratic congressmen from New York who are petitioning the Trudeau government to open the border. So anything that can be done to leverage strength for the American position versus a weak position for Ottawa is a good thing for both Democrats and Republicans. So it really is a bipartisan issue. The other side of it, too, is that the Democrats, despite the rhetoric that comes out of their very noisy left-wing faction, the Democrats themselves are more right-wing than Canadians, the Canadian Conservatives, and you can look at that on a number of issues, whether it be from spending to healthcare to defense.
When it comes to healthcare, would Alberta remain a Medicare province where everybody's looked after?
One of the great things is, in my time in building Wexit and being the key negotiator from the Wexit side for the past merger between Wexit Alberta and the Freedom Conservative Party, we now have the Wild Rose Independence Party. They're developing some fantastic policy that's made in Alberta policy. The cool part about being a state is you've got a lot more freedom. So we would have the freedom to have Medicare, but not the kind of bloated, ineffective, super expensive Medicare in Canada, that forces people to either die while they're waiting in line or pay money out of pocket to go to get treatment in the USA. So for those people who can't afford it, I think our sentiment is, and again, because when it comes to USA, we would be a little bit more middle of the road, is that for those who truly can't afford it, nobody here has any problems paying for Medicare for people who truly can't afford it. But for the rest of us, myself included, we can go get our own private insurance. We'd be spending less and we'd be getting better access to health care. We'd have hospitals that are running surgeries 24 hours a day rather than just in the morning. You got doctors right now that are only doing 2 surgeries a week. I mean, you have them being able to perform all week long. So it'd be better for everybody. A truly made in Alberta model that's currently prohibited according to the Canada Health Act right now. The U.S. just gives us so much more freedom.
Have you or your group been in touch with the Trump administration? No,
we haven't been in touch with the Trump administration. However, we've had wonderful people, well placed within political and industrial sectors in the U.S. who we've been working with, and we've been developing great friendships and great working relationships. And everything's going according to plan. We are going to be reaching out to apply for foreign charitable tax status in the U.S. So it'll be great when Americans can start making tax-deductible donations to the Alberta Usa Foundation to help them advance their integrated, because our economies are so integrated right now. In Alberta, if this border shutdown continues, 87.1% of our exports go directly to the U.S. So the situation's not good economically for either of us on both sides of the border, and it can be much better. And I think a lot of folks on both sides of the border have the interest in making that happen.
Do you think President Trump would welcome the state of Alberta?
In a heartbeat. The guy's a deal maker. He, what kind of legacy? I mean, imagine the legacy he'd cement for himself. Not to mention, read between the lines. When Justin Trudeau purposely forgot Alberta on Canada's 150th birthday, Mr. Trump remembered. And when he's been talking publicly about buying Greenland, Alberta would be a much better investment.
Would Alberta be in a stronger financial position by joining the U.S. or becoming an independent country?
Oh, it's no doubt by joining the U.S. If I was Mr. Trump, or if Mr. Biden won, if I was Mr. Biden and the administration, if I saw a weak, independent Alberta that's landlocked and that doesn't have trade relationships, I would maximize every advantage I have to make it tough to do business unless I got exactly what I wanted out of the situation. And if I was American, I would want Alberta to be a state, 100%. The cool part is that it's mutually beneficial. We would go from, again, being in the situation we are in right now with Ottawa, with we have economic embargoes within our own country. We have regulatory embargoes within our own country. That would cease overnight. We'd have $100 to $200 billion in investment. Jobs would be going through the roof. Employment, we're right now at 12% unemployment. That would go away overnight. We would have 2 senators in an equal elected effective Senate. We'd have just as much say in the Senate as states like California, New York, and Texas. I just don't see any downside to this. The tax burden, we could go to be a state that has no income tax. And the taxes that we do pay federally, we're actually getting a military. We're actually paying for a diplomatic corps that is providing more access to the goods and services made right here in Alberta. So it is good for everybody. Number 1 military in the world. Right now we're on the flight path for Alberta's on the flight path for Russian missiles. I feel much more confident with American anti-air and missile defense than I do with Canadian, and it's just the way it is.
We'll have more with Peter Downing right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Peter Downing. Peter, what procedures would need to take place before Alberta could join the U.S.?
Simply put, we have to have a referendum. The one thing that's very important to us here as Albertans, to the United States, to the international community, is an expression of the public will. So if you look at 1948, when Newfoundland voted to join the Canadian Confederation, they voted 52.3%. And that's all it took. So we simply need 50% plus one to have a majority. And once that happens, and we could go the route of the, again, like I said earlier on, Canada sort of shot themselves in the foot when they've got the Clarity Act that says that Ottawa needs to, that the House of Commons needs to certify the question and the vote and all this stuff and take into account how the rest of Canada feels about it. And they also said that the Quebec secession reference of 1998 says that Canadian law on this issue is in accord with international law, and international law goes so far as to say, and the precedence on this with Kosovo is that simply all it takes is that secession is a political act. And with the rights and the principles of self-determination, that people have the right to self-determination, political self-determination, that simply put, a unilateral declaration on independence is good enough. However, for that unilateral declaration of independence to be valid, we need 50.1% of people to vote yes, to vote to leave in a referendum. And then simply put, we can decide how we want to do it. Maybe we want to go it alone, or we want to petition the United States to be accepted as to be admitted to the Union as the 51st state. So it'll be two steps. Number one, have a referendum on leaving Canada, and number two, agree on whether we want to do it ourselves or petition the U.S. And just the benefits. Texas was in a similar situation when they got their freedom from Mexico. They went it alone for about a decade, and then they joined the U.S. because they realized it wasn't economically viable. And Texans have a sense of exceptionalism, the same as Albertans do. So it would be very similar.
If Albertans vote on joining the U.S., are you concerned about voter fraud?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that would be the kind of thing where everybody involved would want to have the due diligence, because that voter fraud cuts both ways, right? Is, the question about people who are not eligible to vote, or maybe they don't have their citizenship. And I'll tell you what, a lot of immigrants who came to Canada, America was their first choice. So, illegal voting could cut both ways and actually possibly work in the favor of joining the United States. So, I think it'd be in everybody's interest to make sure that there's strong voter verification, ID voter verification on that topic for both of us. Because I think if you look at it again, America was the first place that immigrants wanted to go, not Canada.
Mail-in ballots being pushed by the Democrats in the U.S., the NDP in BC. Your thoughts on mail-in ballots? I just, if you want to safeguard democracy, you need to have strong voter identification. None of these things. For instance, if you're a senior or already, but let alone somebody who's susceptible to the COVID-19 virus, the Elections Alberta, Elections Canada already have handheld voting stations and portable voting stations that they take into seniors' homes all the time now. So there's no need to change it. There's no need for mail-in ballots. If you live overseas, if there's the absentee ballots, everything's worked just fine up until now, and there's no need to subvert our democracy. It's too much of a risk.
What would happen to Canada's economy if Alberta left?
Oh, it would fall apart. The country would fall apart. When Quebec was looking to leave in 1995, even before then, the government of Saskatchewan, which was an NDP government at the time, which admittedly is not as far left as the NDP is now, but the NDP in Saskatchewan already had plans in 1994 to leave. You can do an internet search on that. It was the Ray Romanow government. So simply put, if Alberta leaves, Saskatchewan would leave. But in terms of joining the U.S., I really see it more logically that Alberta would leave first, and then British Columbia Alberta would be accepted first, and British Columbia would be second. And then naturally, again, if there's no one to subsidize Manitoba, then they're in a situation kind of like maybe a state like North Dakota too. So, and then when that happens, you geographically cut off the territories and the Northwest Passage, and basically Canada goes back to pre-1847 conditions. The only saving grace is that there's strong financial centers in Toronto and Montreal. So, they've got the ability to possibly to finance our development projects, but that would be about it.
If the swamp was removed from power across Canada, should Alberta remain part of Canada?
Well, no. I mean, let's take the swamp out of it. Let's take corruption issues. Trudeau and his 3 scandals. It's demographics, Jim, simply put. For the rest of Canada to maintain its quality of living, they have to increase taxes on Alberta. You have massive retirement of baby boomers in Ontario and Quebec happening right now. We've just crossed the threshold right now of Albertans paying $6,000 into Ottawa that we don't get back, now to $20,000. Simply put, for Canada to maintain its quality of living, Alberta has to suffer more. On the flip side, for Albertans to even maintain their quality of living, we have to leave. And this isn't an issue about corruption or non-corruption. This is just simply the way the country is structured.
Do the Laurentian elite still hold all the power in Canada?
I think they have heavy influence on the people who get elected in Ontario and Quebec. Absolutely. And so what I expect, I could be wrong, but what I expect is those who understand what the consequences of Alberta leaving and joining the U.S. means, I expect to see a heavy push towards appeasement, appeasing Alberta. Probably the same degree as Quebec, once they realize. As of right now, until they realize, they're going to continue to ignore. Their mentality is screw the West, we'll take the rest. That's been a liberal playbook from back with Trudeau 1.
Would your movement consider joining the People's Party of Canada to keep Canada together?
Well, I wouldn't. The reality is again, you talk about. I was asked this question on the Evan Solomon show last week. Is what about beavers and hockey and maple syrup? And that kind of question to me is just like, am I willing to allow beavers and maple syrup and kind of hockey, this idea of Canada, to take $20,000 of unreciprocated taxes away from me, my wife, and my children? I've got a household of 6, so that means 6 times 20,000. You do the math every single year, right? And other Albertans are going to be asking the same thing. So no, I don't think that the ties that bind that what Canada is, there hasn't been nation building in Canada to the same extent as the U.S. All we've ever known is we like hockey, we drink beer, and we're not American. And that to me is not enough to pay $20,000 per head in unreciprocated taxes to Ottawa. It boils down to money and demographics.
We heard about a coroner in Alberta listing a heart attack death as a COVID-19 death. What do you make of COVID-19?
I'll be candid. My position has changed as the evidence is starting to come out. Just last week, or maybe it was the week before, the head of the World Association of Biotechnologies, an Italian fellow named Giuseppe Trito, released a book
And it really just highlights the names, the dates, everything that they've known kind of from the inside. And this fellow's worked for that organization for 18 years. It's actually part of one of the UN organizations. And simply put, and what he's saying is echoing what the former head of British military intelligence, MI6, had said, is that this is a man-made virus made in a Chinese military facility. To the purposes and extent of what is, I mean, there's speculation as to what the intended purpose of the virus is, but what we know is that it can be very harmful to people who are have compromised health or compromised immune system and they're older, and what we've seen is older people dying or compromised people dying, and we've seen economic havoc worldwide, and especially in the Western countries. So, was it done to purposely drive down cause economic devastation and drive down the prices of Western companies and Western assets so that they could be snapped up by Chinese interests? You know, we may not directly know the answer to that, but I think that the route that we should be taking here in Alberta is not forcing people to wear masks, which, by the way, are statistically proven not to work, and it's kind of like trying to stop a bullet with a tennis net or a fishing line or a fishing net. But simply put, is and according to Mr. Trudeau, and unfortunately the book's only in Italian, but you can find snippets of what he's saying in English, is even a vaccine won't be effective because of so many mutations of the virus and China has not given up the original, I guess, mother strain of the virus, which means that any vaccine that's developed is only going to be partially effective. All Western nations, all nations need to simply say, China, we're not need to halt trade, slap tariffs, make it completely economically unviable for China to continue to hold on to this virus. And I think taking the steps that Mr. Trump's been taking is ordering different companies to divest their Chinese assets, or Chinese companies to divest their shares or to sell off their shares. There has to be reparations for what China has done.
Numerous doctors are speaking out on the effectiveness of hydrochloroquine, azithromycin, and zinc to cure the China virus. And if I screwed up the pronunciations, my apologies.
No, you said China. You pronounced China right.
Okay, close enough. Yeah, politicians, chief medical health officers, and the mainstream media are pushing for a vaccine. In your opinion, are there crimes against the people being committed here?
Well, I think this is the same profit-driven behavior that we've seen out of the pharmaceutical industry for a long time, whether it's been the overprescription of powerful addictive opioids, which caused the opioid crisis, or whether it's something like this, where there is a completely inexpensive, widely available option to solve this that interferes with their ability to make money, and why that they might be okay with continuing to treat the problem rather than solving the problem with only partially effective vaccines, which require massive tax subsidies and legislation that makes it mandatory for people to take them, and it creates a captive market. So I look at it more, it's sort of one of those banality of evil things, where I think it simply boils down to money. I think that any time government enacts policies that knowingly destroys or creates a loss of life in the general population, when it could have been averted for profit-driven or political reasons, I don't know the threshold of what it means to be a crime against humanity, but simply put, these people need to be strictly dealt with and punished, so that anybody else who sees the denunciation of that won't want to do it again. And at a minimum, they need to be removed from office.
Wearing masks can cause health problems for some people. Is the mask wearing a campaign to get the sheeple used to Marxist-style government controls?
Yeah, and you know what? I'll be candid, I was somebody who thought more along those lines as well, until I saw the evidence come out from from Dr. Trudeau earlier this week, and he is somebody who I think has all credibility on this. I see this as being more something, again, I think it's more stupidity than evil. And don't get me wrong, I think that our politicians are being influenced by people who are putting profits before people, for sure, to their detriment. But I see this as, I see the solution to this problem, because masks are not effective. They simply aren't. The peer-reviewed, journal-published data on this, both before and after COVID, and I can make that, I might email them to you after so you can take a look, and maybe you can let your viewers see it. I was doing my PhD in psychology before Wexit took off, and this is the kind of stuff that we had to do in our research. I mean, this isn't just opinion or some doctor going up on stage, or some Trudeau-funded journalist saying something. The evidence is simply this, is that they're not effective. So I think the politicians are trying to make the public feel like they're doing something, even though the politicians themselves know it's not effective. UCP MLA Drew Barnes, when he's on the record right now, is saying that by week 3, the government in Alberta already knew that the ability to spread or the damage caused, the lethality of the COVID-19 virus was wildly exaggerated. So why have we seen it go further? Why didn't they start to open things up earlier? Why are they making people wear masks now? And I think it's to show, because the media have done such a effective, horrible, terrible job of creating fear. Fear porn is what I call it. I think the politicians are forced to do something to make people feel safe, despite it really is a placebo effect.
Yeah, the joke in the newsroom, I remember, used to be, if we're not scaring you, we're not doing our job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Marxism's being pushed around the world, including Canada. What can be done to put a stop to it?
For Alberta to leave Canada and join the USA. And it'd be funny because with Alberta leaving, then BC and Saskatchewan, in whichever order it would be, or whichever way it would be, they'd be the United States. This idea that we're going to rely on other people to pay for us is just going to stop. I mean, I'm patently offended. My wife and I have 4 children, and we work very, very hard to raise them. And the idea that people they want to decide that they want to have smaller families, that's fine, that's their choice. But to expect other people to pay for your decisions in life, I think that Eastern Canada is going to find out in a hard way. Alberta really is the only country, the only province in Canada that has a correct demographic curve, that we have more younger people than older people, and it's completely upside down in the rest of Canada. So people are going to find out the value that, you raise your kids, and then it's going to be your kids who take care of you. This idea that you're going to be, that we're paying for each other and it really is a Ponzi scheme. People are going to find out the hard way that there's just not going to be as much there to fund the social programs as soon as Alberta leaves, and we got to start thinking about getting back to really more conservative policies, because they've worked for thousands of years.
Is China's influence in Canada becoming more aggressive, and can I say even more open?
I would say yes, but I would say that that's from a position of fear rather than a position of strength, because I can't say those things to the United States. And I think the Meng Wanzhou case is informative and helpful for us to understand who's really pulling the strings, because I bet dollars to donuts that Mr. Trudeau would have released her in a heartbeat to appease China, but he hasn't. And despite all the anti-American rhetoric from the most anti-American prime minister that we've ever seen, he's had to toe the line. And the reality is China has a horrible demographic curve. They rely on imports for their raw materials and their hydrocarbons, and they rely on exports for the ability to safely and reliably ship their low-cost, slave labor manufactured goods to the world. And as the Americans are continuing to pull out, and even to pulling out of the Bretton Woods order, because now that they're energy dependent, they don't, they're not scared of the Soviet threat. They don't have to give the world access to their markets, and they don't have to use their dominant navy to patrol the seas and to guarantee the safety of commerce for everybody. China's in a world of hurt, and right now you're seeing kind of the death throes of it. That is it going to be they collapse on themselves, or is it going to be that they go out in a blaze of glory by provoking a war by trying to take Taiwan? And even then, they just simply don't have the ability to win that. They don't have the ability to even break out that first island chain of Japan, the Philippines, Malaysia. So, yeah, whether it's getting your oil from across the Pacific or whether it's from the Middle East, with that choke point at the Strait of Hormuz, China's in a really bad situation right now.
President Trump just put a 10% tariff on aluminum being imported from Canada. Is that due to Canada importing the aluminum from China and then selling it to the U.S.?
Yeah, Trump, the Americans caught Mr. Trudeau steel dumping or aluminum dumping, the practice of buying the foreign steel and passing it off. Steel produced, within the from a country within the free trade agreement. So it's kind of funny that he ratified the USMCA agreement on July 1st that has Section 27 with that anti-corruption clause. And I mean, hey, quid pro quo. I think it was he cut Omar Khadr that $10.5 million check. I think it was on Independence Day. So it was something they did to provoke the Americans on Independence Day. So good. I'm glad, and if it hurts Eastern Canada, I don't really care.
What kind of presence does the UN have in Canada?
I think what we've seen the World Health Organization, and I mean those international bodies. I don't pretend that I'm an insider. I just see trends. And they were singing out the playbook of the Chinese Communist Party. So I think Mr. Trump was right to defund them. I definitely 100% approve of that. But yeah, to the extent that they back regimes like China that have influence over Canada or any other regime that Canada's played the prostitute and opened themselves up to the foreign investment from a lot of the countries that have very unsavory human rights records, is more of that. I mean, the nihilism and the lack of principles of the Liberal Party of Canada. I think that anything that's we've seen Mr. Trudeau's ethics, and I'm not going to say bribes are paid or anything like that, but you can suspect there's all sorts of malfeasance going on between politicians in Canada and outside organizations, and I'm looking for, and I'm glad to see those institutions being weakened with the withdrawal of the Americans.
We'll have more with Peter Downing right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Peter Downing. Peter, on the internet, spotlight is being shone on pedophiles, human trafficking, satanic rituals, even human meat. Could this be happening in Canada?
I mean, it's hard to say exactly what's going on with information, misinformation, disinformation. The one thing I'll say is, Canada, crime, disregard for human life, for the value of humanity, crimes against humanity, they can happen anywhere. Okay, and we've seen Canada's own history with the residential school system, the missing, murder, and Indigenous women inquiries, the Highway of Tears, whether it be Robert Picton, any of the stuff that's gone on. We've seen 22 innocent people mowed down in Nova Scotia. The arson bulldoze the crimes, the major crime scene within the month, claiming, we want to, help people move on, and then it finds out that the guy who did it was flash rolled $575,000. And this is all public stuff, right? This is just public information. This isn't anything that could be tarnished as a conspiracy theory. So when you talk about corruption and evil, and that's a human problem. And I think one of the best things that we can do is get back to our Christian roots as a country. Get back to, what sustained Western civilization for 2,000 years. And where you're seeing it fall apart is, whether it be through, saying that all cultures are just as good as each other, to really what we're seeing with this so-called progressivism is really the tearing down and the deconstruction of values that have sustained Western society and made us the best society in history. I think we've become decadent, we've become materialistic, we've been complacent, we've become self-absorbed and self-interested. And I think as a result, dog eat dog, you bring in people from a harder culture who've, fought over dunghills to maintain their existence. You're bringing some really aggressive people over here that are running us right over. So, I think the solution to evil is to get back to God, to make sure we've turned our back on Him, and to get back to Him, and to having that spirit of Christ, I think is only a good thing.
Have police forces in Canada become politicized, where laws no longer apply to certain people?
I was a cop for 9 years, and I saw that all the time. I saw it whether it be women filing false complaints against their husbands to get back at them, or to take the kids to leverage in divorce situation. And unfortunately, it's very public information. I've been through that myself. Or whether it be a police officer or a politician or somebody that they're just not getting the same treatment as the rest of us poor schlubs. It goes on all the time. One of the two things I learned when I was in the mounted police was this. I learned the acronym CYA, cover your assets. And that's not the hill to die on. And to me, it's just so offensive when we're supposed to be without fear, favor, or affection. We're supposed to be doing the right thing every single time. That will wear vests and pistols and go into gunfights. But when it comes to our own promotions, there's blood in the water, and nobody wants to rock the boat. So that's there's different kinds of corruption. One thing I don't see a lot of cops taking drugs or taking money, but there's this other kind of corruption that I think really fits in with the biggest problem of Canada is the mediocrity. Is we don't have a desire to achieve, and this is why Alberta and the USA is such a natural fit. We do have that achievement mindset here, and the history of the settlement of Alberta was really Americans developing, a further northern frontier. So that's always going to be a conflict. And the Alberta desire to achieve, the Alberta advantage is simply the desire to the entrepreneurial spirit of freedom. That really stands in stark contrast to the spirit of mediocrity that we see within the rest of Canada.
The USMCA Chapter 27 focuses on eliminating political corruption in all three countries. If corruption's not eliminated, tariffs can be imposed. Are there any non-corrupt entities in Canada that could investigate and eliminate political corruption in Canada?
No, I don't think so. I really don't think so. You may have good people, but look at the Trudeau. I mean, maybe that 10% tariff was a corruption tariff. That aluminum tariff that you talked about, maybe that was a corruption tariff. No, we don't, and that's, I guess, why you can't have those international clauses, because the country's not taking care of itself. And I think with losing Alberta to the United States, it's going to force the rest of Canada to really decide, what do we want out of our political leaders? Are we going to vote for the guy who's given us other people's money? Because nothing comes for free. Nothing comes for free. And even getting other people's money doesn't come for free, because somebody who's willing to give you other people's money is also willing to take your money. And if you don't got the money to give, maybe they're willing to take your rights. Maybe you don't got the ability to get together in public to politically demonstrate under the auspices of a COVID-19 virus, which, equal weights and measures aren't given to racial agitators, left-wing racial agitators. they can get together, but regular folk can't. So, what's the consequence? And the consequence of not developing things on your own is simply this: when Alberta leaves, the rest of Canada's screwed. It's not going to be a country anymore.
How can Albertans and Canadians combat corruption at all levels of government?
Well, we're doing it right now. We're leaving Canada. I've learned in life, Jim, you can't change people. People got to be willing to change, and sometimes it takes removing yourself from a bad situation to make it happen, even if you love that person. Which, in this case, the ties that bind Alberta to the rest of Canada are very, very weak. So, I think that it's one of those things. The rest of Canada just has to hit rock bottom. And I think the other side too is by us doing this now, and maybe there's going to be such a reaction to it that hopefully Canada does not suffer the same fate as Venezuela, who went down this road, and we know the situation that Venezuela is in right now.
Should Canadian law enforcement look into alleged connections between Justin Trudeau and Jeffrey Epstein?
I mean, I can't comment on any of that stuff, and again, for the same reason that even if it was there, I don't think law enforcement in Canada is strong enough to do anything about it. I think in Alberta, we can only pull the log out of our own eye. We can only take care of ourselves and get our house in order. And simply put, I think a state level, an Alberta Constitution, a state level Constitution, I'm calling it a state level Constitution, that really have some teeth when it comes to political corruption or when it comes to dealing with crime, or allegations of criminal activity of politicians, of powerful business entities, multinational business executives, that kind of stuff, so that people can't use their money or their prestige, their power, that they really are all of us are ruled by law, and that equal weights and measures are used for everybody. So we can only do that for ourselves, for the 4.3 million people in Alberta. I can't comment on the rest of Canada. Trudeau
prorogued Parliament. Does that mean an election may be in the not too distant future?
I don't know. I was surprised with the proroguing. I mean, I was in terms of, and it's not. I mean, Mr. Harper did the same thing when he was staring down the possibility of having his government collapsed. So I think Mr. Trudeau, and then he had an election, then he won a majority. So it seems to be the same playbook. I hadn't factored in the proroguing, but talking through it with you right now, I would see that as part of a strategy designed to lead into an election to win a majority. I actually just saw the election was going to be earlier. I thought it was. I assumed it was going to be this fall that they would have to do something to secure a mandate in view of the WE scandal. And in view of the WE scandal, the same anti-Alberta oil rhetoric has popped up again. And from Resource Community Wilkinson. And Mark Carney's getting closer to government. He's back in Ottawa, and this fellow famously said any firm that doesn't embrace climate change will be bankrupted. So whether it's an election this fall or whether it's in the new year, I see it coming sooner than later.
There are rumblings on the internet that Queen Elizabeth is no longer the owner of Canada. Is there any truth to this? Could it change Alberta's desire to leave?
I don't know. I don't know. One thing I do know is that the United Kingdom, and I take a lot of what I read, and I mean, I bring together a number of resources and folks who are on the inside of things and others who are analysts. And but Peter Zehan, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, a geopolitical strategist with Stratfor in the United States, has said that with America pulling out and not guaranteeing access to the American economy or protecting the waterways, is that it does put the United Kingdom in a tough situation. That the United Kingdom is going to have to, and if they haven't already, work out terms where America it's sort of like mom and dad moving in with the kids, but the kids are calling all the shots now, and that's what I see is different right now between the relationship between the U.S. and the U.K. So, for those of us who are on the political outside and on the outside of power,
I'm learning as I'm getting more experience that you can't, sometimes it's not fruitful to over-speculate. And we're always going to do that. It's human nature when you got some people who are holding on to information and the rest of us don't know it. So we tend to fill in the gaps. And sometimes, and a lot of times, we go too far with that. So all I can say is there's definitely a changing balance of power, a relationship between the U.S. and the U.K. It's definitely in the favor of the U.S. to the detriment of the U.K. What does that mean for the Queen of England's claim over Alberta? I don't know, but one thing I do know is that international law in Canada has affirmed that we really do have the right to unilateral declaration, despite what the Clarity Act says.
Is the Premier of Alberta, Jason Kenney, doing a good job for the people of Alberta?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that he's doing a good job for himself. I think that it's secret. The fellow wants to be Minister of Canada. An unqualified support. He's an unqualified federalist because federalism has given him unqualified privilege. And I think when I say unqualified, sure, he won his elections, but in terms of fighting for, I look at the relationship of a politician as the same as a relationship of a lawyer to a client. That lawyer needs to go into court and be ruthless. They need to be an absolute chainsaw on behalf of their client to get what they want, because that's politics. It's not, a lot of times, unfortunately, it's hard negotiations. Other times when you can find common ground, it's great, but this idea of compromise, that we're going to give up something to get some possible benefit in the future, and it's just like, people who sell investments. It's not the people who invest that get super rich, it's the people who sell the investments that get super rich. And the same thing with politicians. It's not that they're enriching us, it's just they're getting all the power, they're getting all the benefits of government. While the rest of us, unfortunately, are on the outside looking in, and we can just see the diminishing returns, our increase in taxes and the decrease in the effectiveness or even the necessity of the services.
In Alberta, what is Bill 1?
Bill 1 is I believe it's the legislation that prevents. It's supposed to prevent the so-called native blockades from people protesting and shutting down critical infrastructure. So whether it would be rail lines in, CN rail lines, or whether it could be like nuclear power plants or meat production facilities or anything like that. So in general, I think it's a good law. I think just like any law, it does have the potential for abuse. It does have the potential to squelch democratic freedoms and proper protests, but the government's done that anyways with COVID-19. They don't need Bill 1 for that. Generally I think it's a good law, and I mean, from my perspective, I was one of the guys who tore down that blockade, that Wexit blockade in Edmonton. I physically was one of those guys who tore it down. So, the cops should have been doing that in the first place. The cops were all standing around while we did it. And don't get me wrong, they didn't get in our way or anything, which was great. They should have been doing it. So, I think it's a good law, and I think if it gives law enforcement the ability to just do stuff where you can't have political interference, you can't have, Trudeau or any other premier or mayor telling the cops to stand down, I'll give Jason Kenney credit for that. But at the same time, he's pillow punching. He's hitting with half speed, or pretending that he's hitting. This is a knockdown, drag him out fight, and might unfortunately makes right in this situation. And that's the way the politicians need to be on behalf of the public. And Jason Kenney, he's not doing that. And he can do that. If he wants to be the Prime Minister of Canada, he cannot alienate Ontario and Quebec. And Ontario and Quebec are diametrically opposed to Alberta. So there's that.
How is Trudeau's dictatorial gun confiscation going in Alberta?
Well, you'll be pleased to know that I'm somebody who's been affected by that as well. And I'm going to court on this Thursday, provincial court, to apply to provincial. I've already applied for it. It's called the Section 74 challenge. And what's really upsetting is that the Jason Kenney, again, they should know the firearms law. And again, these gun rights group that are saying to fund their challenge of the OIC gun ban,
The better route is just to go apply to get your grandfathered license. So, if I'm successful, I'm hoping that will catch on and Trudeau's gun ban will simply fall apart.
Why is it important to be able to bear arms?
Because we've seen both the horrors of Nazism and communism in the 20th century, or militant communism. I mean, the communism of Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, the Nazism of Hitler, and the death that it causes. I mean, the countless generations of people have been wiped out. So, yeah, 100%. This is the wisdom of the founding fathers of America said that right now, because you've got people who believe in big government, people who can't fend for themselves, who need to band together as a gang, so to speak, to win prestige and privilege for themselves when they haven't earned it, and use the baseball bat of government to beat people into submission because they could never do it for themselves. They can't compete in an open market society. They can't compete based on their own merit. So they band together and get government to tear down people who are doing well for themselves. And they don't get elevated. They just, everybody's equally miserable. And then it really turns into a dog-eat-dog world. So no, people need to, the strong, for those of us who, and don't get me wrong, I don't think there's some people that I don't think everybody should have a gun. Those who can't handle it, or those who would only rely on it instead of, and I'm trained as a cop and a soldier. So, I think I bring a bit of a balanced perspective, but, we should not be afraid of our own citizens. We should not suppress our own citizens. And Mao was right, is that political power comes out of the end of a gun. So people should have them.
Are Canadians more divided than ever?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Whether it be on the East-West political divide that we're primarily talking about, whether it be libertarian liberty versus bigger government on issues like masks and vaccines, firearms to a lesser extent. It's a divide and conquer strategy, and the one thing that the good graces that we have, I'd say by God's grace, is that in Alberta we do have a relatively homogenous political polity along conservative libertarian lines. Yeah, we have our people who in Edmonton who vote NDP, but that's really more public service than necessarily socialism. I think if you solve the public service problem by having an American military infrastructure in Alberta, people aren't going to feel the need to vote for the NDP anymore.
BC Premier John Horgan was quoted as saying Albertan or American vehicles were being vandalized in BC, and he said the reaction should be, I would suggest perhaps public transit. I would suggest they get their plates changed. I would suggest they ride a bike. Your thoughts on his statement?
Well, I'm talking, you live in BC, so I don't want to be too blanket with this because there's a lot of good folk in BC. But no, him and his protective detail, they can enjoy riding bikes wherever they go, because when we separate, you think he's vulnerable now till we turn off the taps or close the border to BC commerce through Alberta or slap super high tariffs on. So if he wants to play that game, geopolitically he's in a tough spot. Yeah, he's got to say that to appease some of the loony left that you guys have in your province. But no, he's about to be bisected from the rest of Canada, and they'll play ball soon. Those guys will play ball soon enough.
Sure, and those license plates can be here legitimately. They might be a student or someone who recently moved to the province.
Listen, I think a lot of you guys need to start sticking up for yourselves. I think that you need to take a firm line with that kind of behavior. Just like if you were seeing a woman being harassed in the street, men got to kind of step up sometimes. The idea that government's going to solve all our problems, and yeah, what Horgan said is idiotic. But I think that's symptomatic of the fact that people, right-minded conservative libertarian folk, need to step up for themselves.
Well, my take on it was that's almost like saying a woman deserves to be sexually assaulted because she's wearing shorts.
Yeah, like I said, what he said is idiotic.
Yeah.
And it's going to come back to bite him.
There's no right time to do it.
it's going to bite him when it comes onto eating his own words. When Alberta separates, all the anti-Americanism and the anti-Albertism is going to come back to bite a lot of these guys in the backside. And at the same time, for you guys to solve your own problems, you got to not let it happen. And I say that from the perspective of instead of sitting here and being a victim when and it wasn't native blockades, it was Antifa blockades. So instead of playing the victim, go out and do something about it. We didn't beat anybody up. We didn't commit any crimes. We simply tore down their blockade. We do what and I talk about getting back to, maybe I don't see us as moving back to the 1950s. I want to see us moving forward to the 2050s under the same ethic of family and community and neighbors taking care of neighbors, but we've got our own yards, and you don't walk in your neighbor's house and raid their food cupboard. You guys got to start sticking up for yourselves. You can't let that stuff go on.
What percentage of Albertans and Western Canadians are awake to what's really going on?
I think we're looking through a glass half darkly. We know that we don't know the full story. We know that our politicians are keeping information from us. We know that the captains of 1984, that book wasn't about communism. It was about collective oligarchy. And if you look at the oligarchs, if you look at the authoritarian line, even the Walmarts are taking towards us now, telling us what direction we can walk. I mean, this is the bigger concern. So I think getting back to supporting local business, your local butcher, your local baker, again, very, very robust firearms rights, direct democracy, rights of recall. For those of us who are pulling the wool over our eyes, got to do something about it. And yeah, our politicians are no friends, but I'll just give you one more maybe on the social spectrum, just something to consider, is we talk about all the taxes that our government imposes on us, and increasing taxes, increasing regulations, more money being robbed of our wealth. The number one killer of wealth is divorce. When a husband and wife split up, and the house gets split up, and the kids' inheritance and their future, it all gets split up, and the lawyers play ping pong. So we do have to take responsibility for ourselves and look at all of this. What is government doing that's hurting us? But what are we allowing to go on? And I mean, I'm not telling people to stay in bad situations, but we've got murderers getting let out of jail because they didn't come to trial, but yet we're having judges determining, who gets what when other people break up. I mean, so I'm just saying it's somewhat counterintuitive, but we have to take responsibility for ourselves, and that's the same ethic that the founding fathers in the 13 colonies had in gaining their independence from Britain. And I don't think we have to fight a kinetic war for this, but we have to be willing to say enough is enough, and thankfully we live in a global environment where we're able to do these kind of things.
How do you get your message through to people who absorb mainstream media propaganda and lash out at people who disagree with the propaganda?
Well, I mean, in the same boat, I can't blame the media. I can't blame a politician. I can't blame anybody for my situation. Wexit started last year in February by me selling a van for scrap metal, $200 to pay for my first billboard, Should Alberta Ditch Canada? And that's how it started. And I think that's how any kind of success starts, is people, they're sick of the situation that they're in, and they do something about it. And success doesn't come overnight. You're trading the paper for the pencil. It took us a year and a half to build the Wexit movement and the Wexit infrastructure. And now I'm starting again, in a sense, with the Alberta USA, but it's kind of on the shoulders of a giant, so to speak, at this point. So it is a lot easier. And I'm using it the same way as before, is through digital billboards, through talking directly to the public, and not even to the political public. We put it as a shocking at the time, Should Alberta Ditch Canada? Well, it's not a shocking message anymore. Should Alberta join the USA? Shocking now, it's going to turn heads. But it's going to be mainstream soon enough for the demographic and the tax reasons that I've already talked about. So, people want to lash out at me on social media. I mean, I just don't spend a lot of time on social media. I do a lot of stuff in terms of the business development and the branding and the work and the running of an organization. But I myself don't spend a lot of time on social media at all. It is a waste of my time. Now, don't get me wrong. I want people to, absorb my message, but that also happens too when I get the media attention. And I've already been interviewed by Vice magazine. You guys graciously offered me the interview because I shared with you guys some of the stuff, and we have a relationship, and I love what you guys do, and I just enjoy being on your show all the time. But I was interviewed by Vice and the Evan Solomon show because they saw the discussion and they saw the billboards were coming. I didn't even launch a billboard yet. When I do, it's going to be great. Go on our Alberta USA page, Alberta USA Foundation page on Facebook, and you can get a sense of what billboard's coming out on August 31st and where it's coming out in Edmonton and in Ottawa. And Ottawa's going to find out that we can reach out and touch them, at least the mind of their voters. And then we're going to do it in Toronto and Montreal, and then Calgary, Vancouver, and Quebec City. So, and we could do it as much as little as we want. So that's the way that we do it. We use digital billboards the same way Donald Trump used Twitter, but I think that we use it to even more effect because I don't have the financial resources or that Donald Trump had or has. So that's how we do it. You got to find a way. You got to find a creative way. One thing I would say about the Canadian Special Forces, which I mean, those soldiers and the warriors, the best warriors on planet Earth, they don't have the resources or the ability or the numbers to do their job. But their motto is, "We will find a way." And we can't sit on our hands. We can't look for somebody else to do it, and we can't complain. We got to get over that. We're conservatives, we're libertarians, however we want to define ourselves as Western Canadians. But we got to find a way to win. And if there's anything that I've done is just be able to show you that it's possible.
Looking at the calendar, is it George Orwell's 1984?
No, I don't think so. Not yet. It's getting that way, that's for sure. Here's the thing. People need to read that book. They need to read that book. They need to read that book. They need to read Brave New World.
And Animal Farm.
Animal Farm, definitely. And I think those books are not just expressions of human nature, but I think it's an expression of knowing what people like this that we currently have in power, who are trying to get more power for themselves, will do if unchecked. Or whether it's those type of people who just wanted to troll us a little bit, 40, 50, 60 years in advance, saying, kind of releasing their game plan to sort of toy with. I don't know. But read the book, learn your history. We need to be having more of these discussions. Not less of a discussion, but here's the thing. I'm able to buy what I want, hop in my truck, do what I want. I'm able to do these things, say these things, even when Rebel Media was kicked out before, journalists did come back into their defense. Now it's gone worse, and Trudeau's bought off the media, and we know these things. But all their power goes away when we join the United States. You don't take care of your political hygiene, provinces fall out. And so once they lose money, they lose the power.
How can people find out more about the Alberta USA Foundation?
So you can follow us on Facebook at so it's Alberta USA Foundation on Facebook, all one word. You can follow me, Peter Downing AB, on Facebook. On Twitter, it is Alberta_USA, so the @ symbol, then Alberta_USA. And then our website is www.ab51pac.com. So that's AB for Alberta, 51 for the 51st state, and PAC for Public Action Committee.com. There's it's like a nation builder page. So for some reason, just working out the kink, if you see the site might not be secured and you get this warning, don't worry, nobody's stealing your stuff. It's just something right now that we're getting solved with the tech people. But yeah, those are the best ways. And from the 31st forward, take a look, check the news, see if they're talking about Alberta joining the USA. There's already the Vice article and the Evan Solomon radio show. So we expect we're going to collect more attention as we get this message out.
Peter, thank you so much for being on the Goddard Report.
Hey, Jim, I always appreciate it. Thank you. Like I say, it's a lot of fun. I love the way that you ask your questions. And I think that you've got some really honest journalism or media. I mean, it's a radio show, so you've got a lot of honesty. You have a lot of honesty in the way that you ask the questions. I really appreciate that. I
give the credit to my executive producer, Tom Allen. He's a great researcher.
He's a rock star.
Yeah.
He is an absolute rock star. You guys are a dynamic duo.
My guest has been Peter Downing, the CEO of the Alberta USA Foundation. You can find them online at ab51pac.com. I'm Jim Goddard. If you have any questions for the show, you can send them to info@howstreet.com.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.